Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. This is part two of celebrating the garden's bicentennial. I see several names that were here with us a few weeks ago when we sort of teed up the first part in this series, really looking backwards at the garden's roots, starting in the 1700s, bringing us all the way up through the many changes over the last few centuries up to 2020. And that's kind of where we stopped. And so today we really want to celebrate who the garden is today, what are the different programs, plant collections, science work, et cetera, that's happening, and really start to look toward the future. So we've got with us a really great panel that spreads across multiple teams at the garden. And so we're going to get to hear from various presenters really looking at what is the garden today and what are those visions for the future. We're probably going to get questions about that first part. It was recorded. And so if you didn't get to join us or you want to look back again at part one, we expect to be able to post that video just in the coming weeks. And so if you signed up for that first program, you'll be getting an automatic notification. But if you didn't sign up for the program, we'll be posting it on our YouTube and on our online programs page. And so we'd love for you to be able to follow through from part one of our history and celebrate the many changes in the garden over the last 2 centuries. And as everybody has said, we've turned 200 a year ago. Unexpected time in the world, but we're here and really can continue to take care of our plants. We want to share what's going on with the garden today and over the next few years. We've got a lot of great content, and I know we're going to have some good questions coming in. I do want to say a quick hello to our volunteers. I see several that are joining in again today. Thank you so much. We're going to hear a little bit more about what volunteers do at the garden as we go through some of the presentations. So hi and special shout out to you guys. We do have some presentations from 3 of our teams to kind of cue up a little bit about what the garden is today. And to start with, we're going to invite Jim Adams to kind of share a little bit about what horticulture is doing today. What are some of the major collections? What are some of the new things happening in the horticulture side of the garden? And so we're going to do that. Then we'll talk about public programs and the various things they're doing, a little bit about science and conservation partnerships. And then after that, we'll jump into a visioning and future conversation with Saharah Moon before we get into questions. So just to kind of give you a run of show today, that's what we're expecting. And with that, I'm going to queue up a presentation here for Jim to be able to talk about horticulture of the garden. And Jim, I'm going to welcome you to the stage here. I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to you and say welcome.
Well, thank you, Devin. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm really excited to be with you. I'm really excited to be at the garden in general. We have as you heard, we have an amazing history, and it's great to be part of that history now. Horticulture is really at the heart of who we are, and the heart of our mission. The plants that we grow are the basis of everything that we do. And in horticulture, we are continuing the tradition of and dedication to dynamic, relevant plant collections, as you see in our tropics here. This is a photo of the tropics that we took in the past couple of months. So those of you that haven't been able to visit the garden, you can get a little sneak preview of what's going on in there. But you may be familiar with some of the traditional collections that we've had and have been known for over the years, such as the orchid collection. There's the Papillopetalum house out at our production facility where we house the majority of the collection, or also our hardy collections, like our native plant collections that are housed in our outdoor gardens. And we're continuing the tradition of these major collections and adding to them and refining them throughout time. But we're also adding new collections and really branching out and expanding. The focus of some of our collections, like the Arum collection. A lot of you are familiar with our famous Amorphophallus titanum, the large corpse flower on the left, but also we have several dozen species of related things, like Amorphophallus atroviridis here in the middle, and Amorphophallus bulbifer on the right. So we are continuing to add collections and add to our collections and continuing to grow our collections, both physically and the collection. And we use the collection to meet our mission in many ways. We use it, as you're going to hear a little bit later, about our conservation programs, and on the left you see some of our work with the Amorphophallus, helping support other gardens in Amorphophallus conservation. We help the folks in public programs with our horticulture team using their expertise to help teach the public using our collections, and also being involved in research. Again, you'll hear a little bit more about that later, but our collections are usually used to help support the areas that we're working with other institutions on research. Now, we're also known for continuing our beautiful displays. The garden always looks beautiful. Aesthetics is part of our mission. And when you walk in the garden court, you often see displays like this throughout the year. Our displays are not only inside. We have really awesome seasonal displays outside, exuberant and celebrating the seasons as they go by. We use our displays in shows, like our orchid show here in the middle, and in our exhibits like the holiday show. So we have a lot of use, and our exhibits really help forward our mission in many ways. And we use our exhibits again, very similar to our collections, and we engage the public with those. Here's an access program with folks volunteering to help us prepare for the orchid show. We use our exhibits to teach, and here we have gardener in one of our production facility open houses, and in research. So our new green roof, you're going to hear a little bit about later, more about, but this is an exhibit that isn't that will be accessible virtually, but not really by folks going up there. But we are using this to assist others in doing research. And in horticulture, we're really getting back to the roots of the garden, no pun intended. The garden was founded on plant collections, and to make meaningful collections that advance our mission for science and conservation. We are going back out into the wild and trying to expand our wild collected plants. This is a photo of me on a plant collecting trip to northern Japan. And we've had 3 significant collecting trips in the past few years. This is an Amorphophallus, Amorphophallus shiawei, that Bill McLaughlin brought back from his trip to the Philippines in 2017. And this was a species that was unyet named when Bill brought it back to the garden. Some of the plants that came from Japan, Dianthus superbus, Cornus controversa, and Iris setosa. So these are wild collected plants that have replaced some of the nursery purchase plants out in our outdoor gardens. And then Bill McLaughlin also went on a trip to Texas, Central Texas, looking for plants that would survive extreme environments of heat, cold, drought, and wet. So we have Rus laciniata on the left, Rudbeckia maxima in the middle, and Yucca glauca. So all of these are out in the garden, and many more plants from these collecting trips have yet to make their way out into the garden. But so we're really looking forward to our future insofar as our plant collecting as we move ahead. So thank you. A little bit about horticulture right now.
Thank you, Jim. We already had some cool questions coming in on the questions tab already that we're starting to try to answer. But if you've got other questions about horticulture, feel free to use that questions tab to ask those. We will be getting into audience questions a little bit later in the program. At this point, though, we're going to tee it up for the next team in the presentation series to talk a little bit about what is happening with the public program side at the garden. And so for this, we're going to invite Amy Bolton up to the stage.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. Welcome to our program today. Looking forward to answering your questions and having a great dialogue in a second. So we're going to talk about public programs for the next couple of minutes. The way that we think about our work is that we engage people where they are, online, at the garden, and in the community, to bring awareness and understanding of the importance of plants for everyone in their daily lives. And so my team has expertise in education, visitor services, and exhibit and graphic design. So we want to connect our audiences to horticulture, plant science, and our collections through programs, events, and exhibits. And during the pandemic, as you know, that meant going online and bringing the garden to people's homes in 48 states, plus DC, and 13 countries. So the team produced programs for adults, teens, and students. Our online programs feature experts with practical information about gardening, lectures on history and culture, creative ways to engage with plants, such as natural dyes or cooking and illustration, plus the latest in scientific research. So we're excited about continuing online programming into the future. We also know the power of being in the presence of beautiful and amazing plants. Coming to the garden is a special and unique experience for everyone. And so at the garden, we offer our K-12 school programs and professional development so teachers can bring that excitement about plants and plant science back to their classrooms. Of course, if you tour the conservatory or outdoor gardens, you can learn about the scientific, cultural, and historic significance of our collections. So we strive to harness a sense of wonder and curiosity to take the learning that people experience to new and unexpected places for all of our audiences. And in our programs, everyone can use the tools and techniques that scientists use to better understand and make sense of the natural world where, of course, plants rule. But we also seek to bring joy and peace and relaxation to our visitors. Programming at the garden is an opportunity to create or connect creatively through all the senses and to pause and take in the beauty that surrounds us. So one of our signature programs is urban agriculture, and it has a home base at the kitchen garden in Bartholdi Park. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But behind the scenes, as you've seen, there's also more to the garden than what most people visit on the hill. So we open the production facility once a year for the behind the scenes event where you can better understand how the garden works and also to see that vast plant collection that Jim just gave us a glimpse of. So the employees are supported by an army of volunteers to make this public event fun and accessible. And again, as I mentioned, with urban agriculture, it's one of our signature programs. And one of the great parts about the urban agriculture is that it highlights practical applications in growing food plants. And we can work with colleagues in horticulture to offer hands-on programs from growing food to caring for your plants, and also cooking programs to learn how to bring that harvest you've been working so hard on to your table at home. We're also proud to work with our local and national partners to develop programming at the garden and in the communities. Our partnerships bring together great minds so that we can create educational resources such as the Greenhouse Manual and the Guide for School Garden programs. Those are both available free for educators online. So as you've seen, there's a lot of work that we do to bring the garden to the public, and much of that would not happen without the wonderful contribution of volunteers. They make it possible through their support and their enthusiasm and their dedication. They're often the first smiling, helpful face that you see when you enter the garden. Volunteers also facilitate hands-on discovery carts. They lead tours, they help with school programs, and they work at special events. They expand our capacity to engage and welcome visitors and bring a wealth of knowledge with them every day. Volunteers also work side by side with horticulture employees and in the garden and also in the production facility. The garden strives to make everyone feel welcome and our facility accessible with a variety of programs and services based on the needs and interests of our diverse visitors. And so while the plants change with the seasons, our exhibits also change on occasion. We explore plant science, art, and history in our exhibits as they connect to our mission, bringing a variety of perspectives and voices to the garden. We also know that we are known for our holiday displays and orchid shows that also include educational programming, highlighting the ways that plants are used in our traditions and also the science behind the caring for our stunning orchid collection. So beautiful graphics, accessible educational content are woven together in the garden's interpretation. And this interpretation creates a journey through the glass houses and outdoor gardens that foster a deeper understanding of the vital roles of plants in our ecosystem and in our daily lives. So we look forward to connecting with you on our next visit at a future public program or at the garden or online. Thanks.
Thank you, Amy. Online, exactly like we have lots of upcoming online programs. If you want to check those out, you can go to usbg.gov/online programs. We'll drop a link in the chat as well. But we'd love to see you back at future programs exactly like this. Thank you for that walk through what the public programs team is doing today, Amy. And next up, we're going to talk a little bit about science and conservation using the plant collection. And I'm going to invite Dr. Susan Pell up to the stage here to talk about science and partnerships.
Hey, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us today. And I'm going to get right to talking about science and partnerships. So we bring several assets to our scientific initiatives, and those are primarily our expertise, and Jim's talked a little bit about that, and I'll talk a little bit about it again in a minute here. Our growing facilities at the production facility, the conservatory, and of course our outdoor gardens, and our living collection, which right now we maintain about 50,000 plants, and over 500 of those are actually at a conservation status that puts them at a higher risk for extinction, and that is that they have a conservation status of vulnerable or G3 and above. So those are a key component of our conservation science initiatives, and then as are some of our key collections that Jim already went over. So horticultural science, we have a lot of expertise in being able to grow plants, maintain plants, knowing what plants are and where they come from, et cetera. And we have several ongoing research projects in horticultural science. So one of those is in conservation, propagation, and breeding. And we're doing this with a diversity of plants. I have a picture here showing Morphophallus titanum, and this is actually Jim and one of our arborists, Steve, that are collecting pollen from one of our recent blooms that happened last fall. And this is part of a multi-garden initiative led by the Chicago Botanic Garden to conserve the to conserve the genetic diversity of Morphophallus titanum, or the corpse flower, in conservation. Propagation, sorry. And then another project that we have that's ongoing is our green roof research project that Jim mentioned. And this is in collaboration with a scientist from the University of Maryland. And we're looking at ways that green roofs can reduce stormwater runoff. So we've planted a couple of different pallets of plants up there. One of them is a mix of sedum, which is a traditional green roof plant, and native plants. And we're combining these wonderful plantings with some irrigation to maintain these plantings at their optimal health level so that when we have a large storm event, they can absorb as much water as possible. Much of the science impact that we have through the US Botanic Garden is with our partnerships. And we have many partnerships, and I'm going to talk about just a few of those today. Several of them are with the Smithsonian Institution, and those include partnerships with their Environmental Research Center, with whom we've established the North American Orchid Conservation Center, which is dedicated to conserving the orchids that are native to the United States and Canada. And we also have several kind of spin-off educational aspects of these science partnerships, including at NAOC, where we've developed Orchid Gami, which you may have seen in the conservatory. We also partner with Smithsonian on their Global Genome Initiative, the Gardens branch of that, which is an initiative that aims to preserve about 50% of the world's plant genera by cryopreserving and drying, preserving herbarium specimen vouchers of plants that are grown at Botanic Gardens, arboreta, and greenhouses. Another partnership with Smithsonian is with the National Museum of Natural History's Botany Department. With them, we offer a botany symposium every year, and this year's is online. It's actually this week, so you're in luck. You can still register for that free program, and Devin will drop that registration link into the chat. The theme for this year is plant symbiosis, so we're going to explore the wonderful relationships that plants have evolved with other plants and with other organisms such as insects, fungi, and bacteria. We have a long-standing partnership with Botanic Garden Conservation International's US office, And with that office, we created many conservation strategies, including the North American Botanic Garden strategy for plant conservation, which was part of a global initiative to advance plant conservation. And then we also have done many progress reports and other conservation assessments with BGCI US to look at how these projects are working and what are the opportunities given existing living collections in the United States to advance plant conservation. Another current partnership is with NatureServe, and this is one of the entities in the United States that does conservation assessments and determines the sort of status, the conservation status of species across the country. We're working with them to assess some single site endemic species, so those species that occur only in one location. And then we're also working with them to look at conservation assessments of crop wild relatives, and we're starting actually with several grape species on that project. We're also working currently with the Morton Arboretum on their Global Conservation Consortium for Oak, and that project involves a lot of field work, some of which we're supporting in the southwestern United States, and also doing a lot of different conservation assessments for tree species. So looking ahead, well, we want to grow our contribution to plant conservation, which is an area of plant science that we've been very active in, as you can see from those partnerships. And we want to do that both here in the United States, but also globally. And we also are developing opportunities to increase our impact on plant sciences by engaging in new areas of research that we really haven't previously been engaged in at a large level, large scale. So what are we doing to make that happen? Well, we are expanding facilities, and Saharah is going to talk to you in just a minute about our production facility renewal project. We're planning to add a laboratory to the production facility, and we are going to be welcoming scientists to that lab and also to our growing facilities by developing science internship and visiting scientist programs, and generally by making the collections and the facilities more accessible to researchers. Happy to take your questions in the panel discussion about these scientific initiatives and talk more about it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Susan. We are seeing some questions coming through. Thanks, guys. We're excited to see those. That's a brief look at 3 of the different teams at the garden today. 2 of the other teams that really are integral into making sure the garden work are our operations team, who really make sure all of the facilities that are imperative for taking care of a diverse plant collection from around the world. So the operations team is key. And in fact, if you do come on site soon, you'll see that they have just this week been working on the Bartholdi Fountain of Light and Water, which is back up and running. So thankful for all the good work that they do to keep the garden in good shape. And the administrative team, which really is an imperative part of making sure that the garden is equipped with all the things that the different teams need in doing all of our functioning day to day. So we do want to stop and celebrate those 2 teams as well. You know what, we've heard a little bit about what the garden is today from these various teams, but what we've not talked about yet is what maybe is the vision for the garden going forward. So we have Saharah Chapotin here with us, who is the garden's executive director. And I want to invite her to share for a few minutes some of her ideas and goals for the next few years going forward for the US Botanic Garden. And so I'm going to invite her to the stage now and ask Saharah, what are you thinking?
Great. Thank you, Devin. Thank you all for joining us. Thanks to our panel for their great presentations. We're just so honored to be celebrating 200 years of the US Botanic Garden, such a phenomenal milestone. So a little bit about looking ahead. There's a few things I want to talk about. But first, I'll just say, looking ahead, we really want to continue to be America's Botanic Garden. We're right here at the base of the Capitol, and we have such a preeminent place sort of in our nation's history. But we want to be a place where everyone feels welcome and where everyone can find something that inspires and engages them. So this will mean, I think, asking ourselves some really tough questions. Do we reflect our community that could be visiting the garden that perhaps isn't? Are there elements of our institution that may not feel welcoming to everyone? Are all of our facilities and resources accessible to people of different abilities? And are we finding meaningful ways to connect with people who maybe don't care about plants or think they're not important? So looking ahead, we need to be asking ourselves these questions, and we need to see where we come up short. We need to actually change how we do things and ensure that we are fully inclusive and responsive to our community. So that's my commitment to the garden, and that's really an area where I think we'll be doing a lot of work going forward. We also need to look inward and make sure we're creating the most inclusive and respectful workplace for our employees and our volunteers as well. Another area, Dr. Susan Pell shared about how we are growing our science programs. That's an area that I am very committed to and tremendously excited about. You heard about how we're making our collections and our facilities more available to scientists. As one of the nation's preeminent botanic gardens, I would really like to see us more fully engaged and contributing to the plant sciences. So over the next couple of years, we are going to be mapping out where are some gaps and how can we as a botanic garden position ourselves to support discovery and to shape a new generation of plant scientists. We also have a very long history of engaging in plant conservation. So as you heard just now, we support partnerships to advance plant conservation in the US and globally. Going forward, I want to see us really expanding our influence and our reach in this area, working with other botanic gardens and with other institutions to advance conservation here in the United States and around the world. It's estimated there are about 400,000 species of vascular plants in the world, and many plant species, communities, and ecological interactions are in danger of going extinct. In fact, a Q report recently estimated that 40% of plant species are threatened with extinction. I think that we, the U.S. Botanic Garden, can bring attention to this critical issue, and we can support efforts to identify and document where the plants are most threatened so that conservation resources can be used most efficiently. I also envision the USBG going forward as being a model for sustainable facilities. So you heard about our green roof on the conservatory. That research is helping cities to understand how to best reduce the stormwater going into our combined storm sewer systems, these systems that are so common in these older cities in the Eastern Seaboard and in other parts of the country. Another area, the USBG, along with partners, we developed the Sustainable Sites Initiative, which is a sustainable standard for landscapes. If you go to Bartholdi Park, just across Independence Avenue from the conservatory, you'll see a great showcase of how this works in practice. Susan mentioned our production facility, and you saw the pictures that Jim showed with all the plants growing there. We're planning a complete renovation of that production facility. It's located in Blue Plains, down at the southern tip of DC. And again, it's where we house the majority of our collections and we grow up all the plants for our exhibits and displays. It's also where we have our mechanical shops. The facility is aging and it needs to be upgraded to better protect our plant facilities, our plant collection, sorry. So we plan to make it a showcase for sustainable facilities. We're looking at how we can maximize solar, geothermal, stormwater management, and how we can integrate the latest in greenhouse technologies to really improve efficiency across this site. We also plan to incorporate more options for public engagement and education. We anticipate having an urban agriculture demonstration farm and an education center where people can learn about plants or agriculture and sustainability. We see the center as being, and the entire facility really, as being a resource for people across the region or even across the country. But in particular, we actually really hope to welcome people from Ward 7 and 8 here in the district to the facility when it's complete. I'm happy to answer questions as we go forward, and I know our other panelists will as well, so we can elaborate on any of these points that you might be interested in. We're really excited about the future of our garden. 200 years is amazing, and I'm certain we'll have another 200.
Thank you so much, Saharah Moon. I think it's really great to have a little bit of a vision for what the garden might be, headed forward from here. 200 is definitely a really awesome point in our history, and I think we're very excited to be celebrating this and be working at the garden for this point in history. And in fact, if we want to get really literal, we've just entered year 201 because our original founding was on May 8th, and so yay for 201. I will say, we've got several questions lined up here that we really can kind of jump in and start talking a little deeper amongst some of the different areas of the garden. And so maybe I would like to take a few moments here to talk about some of these follow-up questions that we had already started pondering. Clearly, last year, for many reasons, was not what any of us had planned, right? We'd planned a full year of celebrations, really looking at who is the garden today through our history headed forward. But the plants are living things and still had to be cared for. And the garden actually was still able to both take care of the plants and connect with people and successfully present programs throughout the pandemic. And I would love to stop for a moment and say, from each of you, what is something that that the garden was able to accomplish throughout last year that was related to your team? And so I wonder, Amy, might you share something from the public programs team that you were excited you guys could accomplish last year?
Sure, love to. I love to talk about the great things that the team is doing. I think our biggest accomplishment is going online. This was something that I had in my mind as somewhere to go sometime down in the future. I hadn't really expected it to be March of last year, turn on a dime and do that. But the team really brought it and pivoted to be able to bring the programs and the garden to people's homes across the U.S. And I think one of the great things that the team was able to do was to say, what's our strength? What are people interested in? And to be really thoughtful about making that connection between the garden and people's needs. And we had practical horticulture programs in collaboration with our colleagues in horticulture. We were able to bring lecturers to talk about art and history. But we shouldn't also forget that during something like this, a pandemic, that people also need they need some wellness. So we were able to bring yoga every Saturday morning and just let people connect with their communities and connect with themselves, connect with plants. So I'd say that's probably the most positive thing that I can think of offhand that public programs did this year.
Thank you. Yeah, we've heard really positive responses back from many of the people who've been able to join us from online programming over the past year. And it is a great offering, and thank you for your team for all the work that has been going on to accomplish that. Clearly, I mentioned live plants, right? They need a lot of care, ongoing care. And Jim, I wonder, might you share something positive that the horticulture team has been able to continue to accomplish throughout the last year?
Yeah, be happy to. Thanks, Devin. Yeah, well, as you said, the plants need live care. They need to be taken care of, and that can't be done through telework. So most of all, I'm really happy that we were able to keep our team safe and healthy through all of that, because we have been on site continuing to take care of all these things. So that's what I'm really the most happy about and proud of over the past year. But we are a public place that is open 365 days of the year. We're never closed, and so when we do bigger projects, it does impact visitation. Or it takes a very long time because we really only have until 10 o'clock every morning to get those things done. So when we realized that the shutdown was going to be more than a few weeks, we started some bigger projects to say, okay, what are some of the things that we wish we could always do, but were really difficult. So we were able to change upgrade the environment in the tropics and add an extra layer of fog to not only make it better for the plants, but to reduce dripping and to make our floors safer for our visitors. So it's better for both the plants and the people. We were able to do some major bed work and redo some of the beds in the tropics, along with the garden primeval. When we do open our doors again to folks, you're going to see an overhauled garden primeval that has the majority of our fern collection in it, but we got rid of another remnant of the garden renovation from the early 2000s with the big fake log, and we were able to use that space to grow more plants. Tear out the wall that was there and redo it. So when folks come back, they're going to see a physical change in some of the indoor spaces in the conservatory and outdoors as well. We were able to just take advantage of having a little extra time and space and improve what we've already had. So yeah, really excited for folks to see that.
Thank you, Jim. And I actually know there's been a lot happening in the sort of science and partnerships world over the past year. Susan, might you share something positive that's happened during the past year?
Well, I would sort of piggyback on what Amy and Jim said. And the thing that I've been kind of most impressed with are our employees and their resiliency in this trying time and their ability to really get an amazing amount of work done. I've been proud that we've been able to keep them safe in doing that too, and being very flexible in sort of schedules and changing where physically people are working and that kind of thing to keep everybody safe. As far as science goes, I guess I would say one of the things that we've done is maintain some existing projects that we have. And there was a question in the chat from Alex about Rafflesia. So you may have seen we've done some publications in the last few years with a collaborator at Long Island University where we are trying to grow some Rafflesia species, not Rafflesia arnoldii, not that big giant one, but several species that are also large and amazing weird parasites on different species of Tetrastigma, which is in the grape family. So this weird, rare parasitic plant, we're trying to grow some of them from the Philippines. And so that's been an ongoing project. And those are plants that are have never been put into cultivation in the Western world. And we're still working on that. We don't have any yet, but we're still working on it. And that is something that horticulture spent a good amount of time during the pandemic in maintaining those plants and keeping them in their isolated greenhouse from the rest of our collection. So that's one thing that I've been really proud of, is that ongoing project and the great work that our employees have been doing during the pandemic.
Thank you very much, and for incorporating that audience question even amongst the way. I think we really stop at the year 200, right? It's a really nice moment in time to celebrate our history and who the garden is today and the future. And with such a long history, I wonder if there's an element of the garden's past that maybe continues to inform or inspire your work today. And I thought maybe we would start with Saharah Moon.
Sure. Well, there's certainly many elements of our history that we carry through today, but I think one that's particularly prominent and important to me is agriculture. The roots of the garden are really connected to agriculture. In 1820, when the garden was founded, the United States was an agrarian nation, and plants were so important to our economy. The founding fathers, those who envisioned the garden, knew this. They were landholders, they managed farms, and today plants are still critical to our economy. But now we also have a greater appreciation for how we need to preserve and protect all plants and not just the crops. But agriculture still is this major element in our economy around the world. It remains an engine of growth. And plants provide us with sustenance and with everything we need to live. And as part of ecosystems, they provide us with water and air and are critical to curbing carbon emissions. And so I think, there's sort of an element of agriculture that carries into the systems around us and how we advance conservation. And I think there's a link that's very pertinent to us as a botanic garden. It's that crops, of course, have wild plants that they either came from or are related to, the crop wild relatives. And many of these plants that are related to crops have genes that are, adapted to their environment and that plant breeders could be using to bring into their plant breeding efforts. And these genes could help us adapt to a changing climate or combat pests and diseases that are increasing. And so as we think about conserving natural ecosystems and conserving the important plants in them, we have this direct tie back to agriculture, which of course is really sort of one of our founding tenets.
And that's something that we're working on actively with some of those partnerships, like the NatureServe partnership that Susan mentioned, really looking at some of those crop wild relatives, such as the native grapes, which I think many of us enjoy, whether we're eating grapes or drinking wine or various things. And so I think that's really cool to be able to tie our agriculture historic roots back to modern times and our modern work toward the future. Clearly, Jim, there's some really old plants in our collection. Also, there's a historic conservatory and fountain with gardens all around it. There's lots of pieces of history, both physical and plant-wise, that continue forth with us today. I wonder, what might you share in sort of looking at the garden's past, what continues to inform and inspire your team's work today?
I think I alluded to those things, but the two things is the history of our awesome displays and being able to bring people in and from around the world to see our awesome displays. We are at the base of the Capitol, and anybody that visits Washington and goes to the Capitol really passes our doors. So continuing these displays that we've had when the Botanic Gardens used to be across the street, so continuing those and just showing people unusual and interesting plants that they wouldn't have a chance to see easily or anywhere else. But also getting back to the plant collecting. So, that's what we were founded on. We were founded on the plant collections, the collections of the World Exploring Expedition, and I think getting back to those roots, getting back to that activity to have to play with all of the partnerships that we have, whether it be research or conservation, to have that germplasm back at the garden, and to show people, even if it's a common landscape plant, but to show what it looks like in the wild as opposed to being a cultivar that you buy at a garden center, to me is really important and really exciting. But also to look for other plants, like for the outdoor gardens, especially those that can be used in innovative ways, like plants that can wouldn't be really considered for a rain garden, for example, but we would be collecting plants from environments that would work that aren't available. So I'm really excited about the future of that with our collections, that really reaches back to why we were founded. So to go out and find unusual plants and bring them back for use, whatever that use may be.
Thank you, Jim. We've got a few different questions in the chat, and I know that Susan Pell was going to answer a few of these live, and so maybe we'll pivot. Alex has posted two different questions back to back that I think you might be able to weave into a singular answer. And so, Susan, I wonder if you might talk a little bit to Alex's two questions about tables, chairs, and some form of coffee and seeds.
Absolutely. I'm going to lump that all into one answer, which is that I'm very excited to say that our Friends group, the Friends of the U.S. Botanic Garden, is working to develop a store that would be in collaboration with an exhibit that our sort of next big exhibit that we're going to open that's going to be on agriculture. And so that gift store will be in the West Gallery, and it will sell all kinds of things. Now, I'm not sure they're going to have coffee. I doubt that they will, but I can say that they're likely to have seeds and plants and other things. And also, the Friends organization has had a partnership with Zeke's Coffee in the past, and I imagine that kind of thing is something that they'll be exploring into the future.
Thank you, Susan. Very, very succinct answers there, but very useful, I think. Libby is sharing all sorts of good stuff in the chat. If you've not joined us for some of our other upcoming programs, we'd love to have you do that. Continue to type your questions for any of these teams into the questions tab there. We're going to continue answering them as we continue forward in this conversation. I think plants are really interesting to talk about because we all approach plants in different ways, right? Sometimes we approach them just because they're visually beautiful. Sometimes we approach them because they're useful. And sometimes we approach them because they're scientifically important. And we've kind of touched on a few of these different topics today. But clearly, the three sort of work goals that are being talked about today between the public programs, the science, and the horticulture teams, all three of those different areas approach plants in a different way. And I wonder if we were sort of looking at a future question, what might be a new addition to the plants or plant collection, or even a specific plant that you think you would like to add to the USBG in the future, whether that's a personal favorite or something that you think would just be particularly useful to your team's work. And I wonder, Amy, what might be a plant that you would love to add to the garden?
Oh, a personal favorite. I'm just obsessed with the crop wild relative concept that Saharah Moon brought up. I think plants that connect to some interesting topics such as genetics. So understanding how plants reproduce and why genetics and understanding genetics is so important to not only plant science, but our everyday lives and the food we eat. So that's one thing I'm a little obsessed on. But also plants that relate to other important and relevant topics. I think people need to see the plants that we're talking about. So anything that can relate to conservation or extinction. I think extinction is an important topic we need to discuss in a public way, because most people think about extinction when it relates to charismatic megafauna, not when it comes to plants. And that's of concern to me as someone who works in education, that people need to see extinction as a bigger, broader problem, and plants are a big part of that story. So plants that connect to extinction. And then the third one is climate change and how we can use plants to bring that topic into our public programs and our public education. So plants connected to those three topics: crop, wild relatives, or genetics, extinction, and climate change, what I think would be my wish list.
Yeah, that's some really good storytelling connections, which I think can be really powerful in connecting people and plants. Clearly, plants and plant collections are core for the horticulture team. And I wonder, Jim, might you share a plant or plant collection that you would love to add to the garden in the future, or might like to add?
I would really, well, for those of you, so since we've been closed, one of my, in the tropics, one that I wanted since I started there, we added over the pandemic is the lipstick palm, Certostachys renda. It's one of the most beautiful palms out there with bright lipstick red stems that's been planted and doing really well. But so just because I think it's an amazing palm, but so that has been added and is flourishing. So I'm happy about that. But yeah, I really think we can help. I'd like to tell the diversity story a little bit and the crop wild relative story. I think we have a really good place both indoors and outdoors to tell that story about crop wild relatives, both of tropical plants and hardy plants. Yeah, I would like to expand those as well, and would like to see more of that. And also, I just think in our native plant collections, I think we have a great native plant collection right now. Plants of the Mid-Atlantic, states that as a good foundation, but I would really like to see that expanded. I think again, we're in a unique site where we have people from all over the world that come to visit us at the base of the Capitol, and I do think it's important. 90-some%, I would venture to say, don't go beyond downtown Washington when they visit. So they never get to see the plants that grow here and the native plants here. So I think we really have an opportunity and I'd really like to see our native plant collections expanded from the Mid-Atlantic so that we can show off what we grow best here to those around the world. Yeah,
that sounds really useful for especially education and really sharing about native plants and different crop wild relatives as well. Thank you, Jim. Saharah Moon, you also have a really long history with plants, and even though you're, quote, executive director and don't care for the plants yourself, I'd love to hear what might be some plants you would like potentially for the garden to think about growing in the future.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's wonderful to see people be surprised by plants. And when we think of plants, they sit there, they're just kind of hanging out. And plants do such amazing things. They can move, they can throw their seeds across the room or across the forest. They catch in, say, you watch a group of kids sort of look at a Venus flytrap and they're just transformed. And so love to see that kind of plant come in. And one in particular, and I think it remains to be seen if we can make this happen, but very early on, I did my PhD research in Madagascar studying baobab trees. And some of you may be familiar with the baobab from Africa with its long pendulous white flowers that are bat pollinated. Some of the species in Madagascar have these long tubular flowers that open up into this amazing display. And they do it in real time. And I will say that I don't think I've ever encountered a more amazing moment in my life than when I sat in the top of a baobab tree just after sundown, watching lemurs come and kind of nuzzle this little flower and have it just open right in front of us in the matter of seconds. And so someday, if we could get one of those flowers growing in the conservatory, put a live cam on it and let the whole world watch this in real time, I think would just be amazing.
That sounds really cool. We have a few plants that respond in real time, like our Mimosa pudica, the sensitive plant, a few things, and it definitely always captures people's attention. So I can imagine a really nice flowering, moving in real time would be exciting to capture attention and share about plants. Susan, I actually would love to invite you to answer this question as well. What might be a plant or plant collection you think might be cool to add to the garden?
Wow, this is the hard one for me to answer. I will say there's so many plants that I would love us to see us growing. There's some weird economic plants like the finger lime from Australia that has instead of the sort of like kind of long strands inside of an orange slice, it has like little beads that are like caviar, citrus caviar. So that'd be kind of a fun one to have in the collection. I'm an expert in the poison ivy family, but that family includes mangoes and pistachios and cashews as well. So I'm always happy when we get new Anacardiaceae, one of which actually Jim showed a picture of from the Texas collecting trip. So yeah, any plants that we get, I'm going to be excited about and try to learn as much as I can about and help other people learn about them as well.
Clearly, plants are, in our minds in different ways, and I love getting to hear the different sort of answers that you might be thinking about for your teams and some personal favorites as well. I wonder, if we're kind of thinking about the future, what might be a point of innovation, right? Like thinking about the garden's mission of connecting people with plants and really looking at aesthetics as well as cultural, economic, therapeutic, ecological importance of plants. I wonder if you might pause for a moment and share your thoughts on what is an opportunity for innovation in the next 5 to 10 years related to the garden's mission. And I wonder, Amy, might you want to share about that?
Sure, absolutely. I can talk a little bit about where we're headed, whether it's innovative or not. That's an aspiration of us. But we love the experience of the garden, and we think that it's important that people are able to have the kind of experiences that you might have at the garden in their community. So we're excited about expanding our reach out into the community and bringing that kind of experience to people where they are, so that they can experience plants in their own community in new and different ways. But we're also excited to expand our reach with plant science and to have more plant science educational programs so that we can bring that plant science research and knowledge and way of thinking and seeing the world out into the community as well. So relevant science and creating opportunities for people to talk with plant scientists and plant experts, I think is really important. To connect people with those who are doing that work would be the two areas that we're excited to head in the future.
That's really awesome, Amy. Thank you. I know that your team has already been working with horticulture even recently and starting similar sort of conversations, those Ask Me Anything sort of programs, especially geared toward urban agriculture and the kitchen garden that's already started. And so we'd love for anyone to join us coming up soon for some of those programs, but definitely sounds like a really nice forward momentum with those sorts of programs.
Well, I'm very excited about the possibility of the laboratory being added to the production facility head house. I think that's going to just open up an enormous diversity of research projects that we are just not able to do right now. And that would include things like tissue culture, molecular research, population research, maybe even some interesting experiments looking at the fungal associates of orchids and how they help orchids germinate and grow, those kinds of things. So the lab, I think, is one innovation that is going to be really a kind of a sea change for the garden. And then also the production facility renewal that Saharah talked about earlier is going to be just a huge game changer for us in so many ways. And we're in the planning process for that now. But if it includes the things that we are planning for it to include, like really improved greenhouse facilities, a quarantine greenhouse that allows us to really isolate collections that we bring in to make sure that they're disease-free and insect-free before we integrate them, that kind of thing. Those are going to be just the facilities that really set us on a path of success and expansion in the kinds of botanical sciences that we do here at the garden.
And related, since you're already on the screen talking, there was a sort of follow-up question about potentials to partner with some of our DC area organizations. I know we did just partner with the U.S. National Arboretum to celebrate the cicadas. And so we are doing that already. I saw William and sort of a few other people, Alex, posting about different partnerships, maybe the Native American Museum next door. We love partnering with local people, and we do partner with various entities throughout DC. And so want to just acknowledge that idea from Alex, and we are doing it and look forward to continue to expanding it. Clearly, Susan already teed up innovation. as it relates to plants, Jim. And I wondered, there's so many different ways innovation can take form as it relates to growing plants, right? The facilities innovations that allow us to do different things, the breeding innovations. There's a lot. I wonder, what's an idea of something regarding innovation that you think might be something we could work toward in the next 5 to 10 years in horticulture?
Well, I'm really excited by some of the innovations that the gardeners are coming up with to display plants that we haven't been able to display very easily in our past. Like last year before we closed, when we were open, we had our orchid collection highlighted in South Transition. Typically we couldn't display very, very tiny cloud forest orchids at the conservatory because they would dry up and die really fast. So the gardeners at that point that wasn't good enough. Like, since we were going to have the special exhibit to highlight our collection, and they wanted to show off the breadth and depth of our collection, they wanted to display those. So they came up with a way to have reverse osmosis water delivered through tubes hidden behind props that could mist the orchids throughout the day so that they could be grown and thrive and remain healthy. So, and that's just one example. The gardeners really have they don't want to be limited by just what we have, and so just their creativity to show off, to bring up some of those things from the PF that we haven't been able to grow at the conservatory really excites me. And I think we have a great group of gardeners, creative, passionate gardeners who are making that happen. So I'm looking forward to working with them more in the future to get those things to happen. And I have to say, that said, along with Susan and the production facility, greenhouses both are not exactly considered sustainable. I mean, they're glass buildings that we're trying to keep warm when it's 11 degrees outside. So they're not exactly the most sustainable thing, but there definitely are things that we can do to make them more sustainable. And just to make that happen both at the production facility and find ways at the conservatory that we can, not waste the resources that it takes to make such a facility and work. So, we have been doing small projects with ops at the conservatory with the operations team to make that happen, and we're really looking at that more comprehensively with the new production facility. So I'm really looking forward to that as well.
Thank you, Jim. I know we're kind of at time here, but I do want to invite Saharah Moon to think about innovation as it relates to the garden, and what might you be thinking regarding the next 5 to 10 years and opportunities for innovation.
Sure. No, I actually want to build on what Jim was saying. I think it's so critical that we are focused on our sustainable future. And as an organization that cares tremendously about plants and the environment, we have to do this at home. Couple things I can add. We're doing some energy audits to see where we have opportunities to improve efficiency across our facilities. We are thinking about, as we source materials for our exhibits, where does that come from and how can we have sustainable materials? Jim mentioned our greenhouse operations, but also thinking about at the plant level, how do we reduce our reliance on plastics? But I think really the biggest part of this is as we engage with our visitors and as we celebrate the importance of plants, I'd really like to see us carrying into our next 200 years. How can we ensure that those plants in the natural environments they come from are here for generations to come? And so I think one of the most important parts of our mission will building an awareness and an understanding amongst people about how they can protect the environment and the critical importance of plants in their daily lives.
Thank you, Saharah Moon. And, thank you so much to all of you guys for being a part of the panel today and for the audience for joining in.